Stay tuned for the latest message excerpt from josephprince.com.
So they tell us that rapture is something that was conjured up by someone in the 1800s, 19th century. But let me tell you this, that even Shakespeare, who lived in 1600s, he wrote of the rapture in his play Pericles, Act 2, Scene 1. Not in terms of delight, but in terms of removing from one location to the other. He was talking about the rapture of the sea, not the heaven, the sea. He used that terminology because it was well used in those days in terms of removing. Rapture can mean a rapturous delight. He's not referring to that. He's referring from moving from one scene to another. And 1600 is before 19th century, my friends. The famous Matthew Henry, the most famous commentary of any on the entire Bible is a man called Matthew Henry. Now, Matthew Henry, all right, he looks very cute. Matthew Henry lived in the 1600s. And Matthew Henry wrote, he wrote this regarding the rapture, 1 Thessalonians 4:17, his commentary. At or immediately before this rapture into the clouds, those who are alive will undergo a mighty change. What I'm endeavoring to show you, friend, it is not a figment of someone's imagination. It wasn't a group that came together in the 1800s and coined this word rapture. It's something taught down through church history. They might not use the word rapture all the time, but the truth is there. Even the Thessalonians, when Paul was still alive, they were looking for his son from heaven. They were not looking for the Antichrist. Okay? Now that's Matthew Henry. Let's look at another famous minister who commented also in the book called The Practical Expositor. There's Dr. John Geiss. Dr. John Geiss lived 1680 to 1761. All this before 19th century, my friend. They lived during the time of Shakespeare. And what did this guy say on 1 Thessalonians 4:17? We with them shall be carried up by a divine rapture. So I want to tell you this, it's not something that came up with someone's imagination. Okay? So back to this. Let's imagine, that we are now in the city of Salonika, the Thessalonians. All right? We are the Thessalonians. And we have received Christ. Now we're waiting for his son from heaven. While waiting for his son from heaven, because we do not know when the rapture will happen. Right? Some of the brothers or sisters that we love and care for, they died. Now, don't forget, they have no teaching on the rapture yet. Now they are concerned about them. They didn't make it to wait for Jesus to come from heaven. What will happen to them? Will they enter the kingdom? So they have all these kind of thoughts. Anyway, one day, there was a messenger, a runner, who came to the believers in Thessalonica and said, hey guys, the latest from the Apostle Paul. I have a letter from the Apostle Paul. You all know, right? In those days, they don't text. In this generation, you must tell, because some of our youths are like, what? Gross. Really? So you gotta tell them, So one of the elders stood up and said, gather the believers together in Thessalonica. We have a letter from Apostle Paul, our brother. And then Paul has been hearing about their predicament. They are concerned about those who have died. They are sorrowing for them. And amongst these Thessalonians, there's a man, let's call him a young man, let's call him Demetrius. That's a nice name, a common name among Greeks, Demetrius. So Demetrius has been waiting to hear something from Paul, because ever since Paul first came, he got saved through Paul's preaching, and Paul taught him to wait for God's Son from heaven. During that time, while waiting, young Demetrius, he has been tempted many times. Sometimes he said no to temptation. Sometimes he sinned, all right? And he's not sure whether his security with God is there or not. All right, he's one of those that are stumbling Christian. So one of the things I want to answer in this sermon is, one of the biggest things is this. Not those who deny the rapture, all right? They are not a big majority. But a big majority of Christians that believe in the rapture believe not all Christians are going up. And only the faithful ones. Only those faithful ones, those who are watching, those who are overcoming. Now again, that robs the average believer of hope. Okay, and this is big. This one is big. It's a partial theory rapture. So let's look at the Bible. Don't let Joseph Prince explain, let the Bible explain. Use judge for yourself. Are all believers going up or not? So young Demetrius, he realized ever since he became a Christian, he has not been what you call a Christian that's been overcoming his bad habits. In fact, he's been falling here and there. Sometimes he wins, sometimes he loses. Sometimes he learns. All right? He doesn't always say yes, and neither does he always say no. He's the kind of Christian. Now he's tense because the latest letter from Paul has come, and it's inspired. It will become Bible. So an elder with a loud voice takes Paul's letter. In those days, it's in the scroll form, and he starts reading. Remember, I told you guys, chapter 1, that you wait for God, chapter 1 again, to wait for his Son from heaven, whom God raised from the dead, even Jesus, who delivers us from the wrath to come. And then he keeps on reading, and he tells them in this letter, Paul says, you know what is my crown of joy? All of you, when Jesus comes again. That's also in 1 Thessalonians. And then he comes to this in chapter 4. Okay? He says, I do not want you to be ignorant, brethren, concerning those who have fallen asleep. That means those who have passed on. Lest you sorrow as others who have no hope. For if we believe that Jesus died and rose again, even so God will bring with him those who sleep in Jesus. Next. For this we say to you by the word of the Lord. Don't forget, Demetrius is straining his ears. We should not be sorrowing for Christians that are dead. Why? Paul says, don't sorrow for them like people with no hope, like the people of the world. For this I say to you by the word of the Lord. So whatever Paul is going to say, it is by the word of the Lord. The Lord is going to say something, and Paul is just a delivery boy. Then he starts to tremble a bit. And the speakers pause here. That we what? We who are faithful, we who are overcomers, we who are watchful. What kind of Christians are going up? Come on. I tell you by the word of the Lord that we who are alive and remain. The only criteria, alive and remain. So, church, I believe it can happen just like that. Amen. That they are straining to hear, we who are faithful, no. We who are overcomers, no. We who are serving, no. We who are alive and remain. Now, it is restricted to believers. Okay? It's for believers. But among believers, there are different kinds of levels of faithfulness. There are different levels of commitment, different levels of consecration. Can I have a good amen? And these people that teach partial rapture, who gave them the authority to say what level of faithfulness will cause you to be going up? The Apostle Paul himself, speaking by the word of the Lord, that says, we who are alive and remain. If you're a believer and you are alive at the time of the rapture, you are going up. Against the laws of gravity that he himself instituted. When you look at the events that's happening in the world today, you know what you say? Well, the thing is this. We can see all the signs happening. The world is focused again on the Middle East. God said it's going to be so. Jesus said so. It'll be focused on the Middle East. It reminds me of a story, a true story in Old England. There was a property man, a wealthy property man, but he was a kind man. And he purchased a large strip of land, acres and acres of land, for building new house projects. Okay, but in the midst of this land, there is a broken down, dilapidated old hut. An old lady stays there. She lives all by herself. And when his messengers came over and told her that her days are numbered, this land has been purchased. In any case, her house is dilapidated. It's time for it to be razed to the ground. But they told her that they'll build another house for her somewhere else. At first, she wasn't very, older people are always like that. They prefer the familiar. The top man, the property man himself, heard about this, and he himself went down to see that old lady, and he told that elderly lady, I promise you a beautiful house where I personally make sure that you have ready electricity. These are many years ago. You have ready water running through the pipes, which you don't have now, and you will lack no inconvenience. I'll build that house for you, okay? In a place where you can have help anytime you need the help, whereas down here you are far away, all right? I'll make sure that this will not be to your detriment. And he told the lady this, when the time comes, your house is ready, I personally will come and get you myself. Well, about half a year passed, and true enough, as the date drew nearer, she saw bulldozers coming near her house outside. They didn't start work yet. The people were piling, they were doing some things in preparation. Okay? And one of the workers came over, saw her, and he had compassion on her and said, lady, are you afraid with the noise of all the bulldozers and all that? Don't worry, we won't break down your house just yet. All right? She said, no, I'm not afraid. When asked why, she says that because that man told me that when my house is ready, he's coming for me. So even though I see all these things, I'm not afraid. He's coming. And true enough, the man came when her house was ready, took her himself, and brought her to that beautiful house, all right, which is so much better than that house before they tore it down. So where we are right now, people, is that we are seeing the bulldozers all in place. We are seeing the whole thing, but the worst is not yet. They are just in position. He's coming for us. This thing should not make us afraid. But he's coming for us.
This excerpt is brought to you by josephprince.com. To get the full message, visit josephprince.com.
You believe wrong, you experience wrong. If you're still battling with toxic emotions, you feel fearful about something, somewhere along the way, there's been wrong thinking that produced that wrong emotion. And why is there wrong thinking? There's wrong believing. And why is there wrong believing? Many a times, people have heard the wrong thing. There's something about men that we have an inclination towards the negative side. We gotta learn to focus on purpose, on things that are good, positive. Jesus says to this lady, your faith has made you well. He told blind Bartimaeus, according to your faith, be it unto you. Everything is received by faith, and you want to have faith. How does faith come? Faith comes by hearing and hearing. And hearing what? The gospel of peace. Good news. If you want to see goodness, you want to see manifestation in your life, keep on hearing. Don't get discouraged. Keep on hearing and hearing. The pastor is not manifesting. Keep on hearing. Your days will be like days of heaven for you and your family. And not only that, all the blessings of Deuteronomy 28 will be in your life.